All right. Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to have you joining us tonight. I'm Claudia Reisner, and I'm the chair of the Veterans and Military Families Caucus, Democratic Party of New Mexico. And we are so excited tonight because we've got four subject matter experts who can talk to us about what we should expect out of the 30-day session that started yesterday. So I'm going to lay out just a couple of ground rules. This is a Zoom webinar, and in the last year and a half, we've learned probably a lot more about Zoom than we really want to, although I still can't quite figure out how to unmute when I need to. But a webinar means that the faces of the guest speaker and the moderator, myself, will show, but we've got lots of other people who are joining us, and we're going to use the chat for chit chat. If you want to say hi to people, or how you doing, or I really love that tie, Representative Martinez, or I want to buy that book, Senator Feldman, put that in the chat. We also have a Q&A, questions and answers option. So at the bottom of your screen, when you see the mute, video, participants, share screen, raise hand, Q&A. Q&A is where we would really like you to put your questions, and probably questions more than just statements. So we've got four speakers tonight, and we're going to start off, I think, with Speaker Brian Egolf, and he will speak for 10 minutes and take questions for about 5 minutes, and then Representative Martinez, same thing, all through our four speakers. So you can address your questions to any one of them in particular, or you can just leave it open and we will read the questions and any one of them can answer. But I do know that both the speaker and our majority floor leader have to leave probably around 5:30 or 5:45. So if you got questions for them, tee them up first. All right. It looks like we have the Speaker of the House on board.
All right, everybody. Claudia, thank you very much. Senator Feldman, it's nice to see you. And our former colleague, Rudy. And of course, we're here with our new majority leader, Javier Martinez from Albuquerque. So we're just underway, and it is a short session. And the focus is going to be on the budget and tax policy. But we do have a few things that we're working on to really highlight the importance of the veterans of New Mexico, the important role that you all play in our state, and show you how much we appreciate you and your service. We created, for the first time back in 2017, the House created its first standing committee created to deal specifically with veterans issues. So that's been a nice thing to have, in addition to the interim committee, is a standing committee that deals with military and veterans issues. We've got in our caucus several veterans. Harry Garcia and Leo Cohn are veterans of the Vietnam era. We also represent Debbie Sanyana from the Air Force. She's with us in our caucus. One of the big issues that we're working on is getting a new veterans home built. It's going to be in Truth or Consequences, where the LFC studies that came out over the summer showed just really in terrible disrepair, and parts of the veterans home are basically unusable. So we're looking at I believe it's about an $80 million investment to make that a state-of-the-art facility. Keep it in Truth or Consequences, a centrally located facility, but to give New Mexico's veterans a place that is befitting of the honor that they deserve and the recognition that they deserve. So that's top of the list for us this session, and we're looking forward to getting that done. And there's all sorts of things that are in our budget that are designed to help veterans, from our state agencies that help to obtain benefits and other things from the federal government. There's all sorts of things that we do to make sure that we're doing everything possible to support our veteran communities around the state. We're looking at exempting military retirement from state income tax. That's potentially a great help to a lot of folks around the state. We're looking at a way to do that so that it's going to be indexed a little bit to income. So if we have especially high earners, maybe not quite so much of an exemption, but for those veterans for whom Social Security and military retirement benefits are a larger portion of their income, we might be able to have some relief there. So those are kind of the highlights. And Claudia, I just want to thank you for your leadership in bringing this caucus together. It's very important that our party recognize the important contributions of veterans and all that you've done and all of your comrades in arms have done over the years to make sure that we have a free country and that all of the rights and liberties that we enjoy continue to be protected for future generations. So thank you for your service. Thank you for highlighting this within the party. And I think I can maybe turn it over to Leader Martinez, unless you have some other, unless we had something different on the agenda. Claudia, I want to defer to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And I really appreciate that you are bringing up the priority issues that we've been advocating for. New Mexico is a state that has always benefited from a number of military bases and active duty. And I got to tell you, my first trip here was 25 years ago. I fell in love with the state, finished up my service and came back. So this place is truly enchanting and very desirable for a lot of veterans. And it's nice to see that recognition, sir. Thank you. Representative Martinez, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Good to see you, and good to see you, Senator, and neighbor, by the way, as well. Rudy, as I was telling you before we got started today, we miss you dearly. You're one of the best members I've ever served with in terms of your temperament and your commitment to New Mexicans across the state, and in particular to veterans. Between you and Representative Garcia, Harry Garcia, I think that you guys always really pushed on us to really think outside the box. So I appreciate that. Just adding on to what Speaker Egoff has stated, I think that our caucus and our party can feel comfortable embracing these issues. I think that 20 years ago, as we were going into the Iraq War, there was a lot of messaging from the other side. And that messaging kind of continues to this day, even when it comes to law enforcement and other agencies. And I couldn't be prouder of our caucus for the commitments that we have made, and prouder of you all, the activists on the other side of the legislative wall, for pushing us to do the right things. I think that the Veterans Home in Truth or Consequences is a great example of how we have doubled down on our commitments to this specific community. Just anecdotally, but a couple weeks ago during the holiday break, I called my friend Representative Harry Garcia, just out of the blue, random weeknight, to check in on him. And he said, I'm driving back home. And I said, well, where are you? He said, I am in between TRC and Grants. He took it upon himself, not as part of a committee, not as part of a formal delegation. He drove with his cousin, I believe, down to TRC to visit the veterans at the Veterans Home. That's the kind of commitment that our members have shown and continue to show for veterans across the state. And clearly the Veterans Home is a glaring example. It's a physical representation of the divestment that has gone on for far too long, but that now we are working overtime and diligently to correct. And so you will see that physical representation fixed sooner rather than later. And not just fixed, but you're going to see a new structure there sooner rather than later. But a lot more remains to be done. As I walk the streets of my district, and Senator Feldman knows this because she lives right where I live, you don't have to go far to see the face of people who are struggling with substance use disorders, people who are struggling with issues of homelessness, with mental behavioral health issues. And many of those folks are veterans. And unfortunately, they've fallen through the cracks. Our state budget, House Bill 2, which is being presented now by our chairwoman, Patty Lundstrom, and our vice chair, Nathan Small, and others, I think really takes those needs into account. And it really finally continues to build upon the investments that this legislature has been making for the last few years in those critical areas of mental behavioral health, housing. There's a big housing push this year again as well, and others. Money is no longer an issue. Money is no longer an excuse. And for the time being, that will continue to be the case. And I think that in our Democratic caucus, you will see that reflected in our budgeting, in our tax policy. You will see that reflected in the way that we approach these very complicated issues. I think we have to be committed to dreaming big. Much credit to our speaker over the last 6-7 years of his speakership, where he has challenged us to think outside the box, whether it's early childhood education, whether it's climate change, whether it's criminal justice reforms, the Civil Rights Act. I mean, that was a heavy lift, and the speaker lifted that up in the last session. Those are the types of big dreams that even 8 years ago would have seemed impossible for this legislature to pass. And now, I was joking at the beginning of the call, but we're sort of just chugging right along, right? Because we've gotten so much done over the last few years that we're kind of thinking, gosh, we gotta, our dreams have to catch up with the speed in which we're progressing here. Yesterday on the way home, I heard a story on NPR, and probably many of you heard this. The VA changed the rule that historically has allowed for caregivers to take care of veterans and they receive a stipend. And that rule was changed. And they interviewed several people who were going to get kicked off of this support because of this rule change. And I was struck by the level of detail. And, you have to prove that your wound was, in combat. You have to account for every little bit of your life. Can you feed yourself? Can you bathe yourself? And I'm thinking, gosh, how disrespectful and what lack of dignity does a government bureaucracy put our men and women in uniform through? When in fact, if you need a caregiver, you need a caregiver. And so I started thinking, can we really wait for Washington to do the right thing? I don't know. I'm beginning to doubt that. But our legislature can certainly do the right thing. And I would love for us to dream big, and in the sessions to come, to think about how the state can help support a caregiving system, so that if you are at home with your husband or your wife or your partner who might be a veteran of a war, or who might be a veteran of the military without having served in war, but still struggles with daily activities, that we help support the caregiving. Because what's the alternative? Put this person in an institution where maybe they'll be taken care of, maybe they won't, right? If they choose to stay at home and there's somebody at home to stay with them and nurture them and care for them and love them, why not help support that caregiving by providing some sort of stipend, some sort of support? I don't know how possible it is. I don't know how feasible it is this year or next year, in the next 5 years. But we've got to dream big. We've got to think big. We've got to think outside the box. And there is no population more so than veterans that our legislature can really put partisanship aside and rally behind. So thanks for the opportunity. I really honored to be a part of this panel with the speaker and with all of you. And I look forward to taking some questions from you all and hopefully being able to answer them.
I really appreciate that. So what I'm hearing is that you want to be a dream catcher, that we need to think big, think outside the box, and send it to the legislative body. And we can really make some inroads here with the cash, the revenue that we have on hand. That's fantastic. Let's see if we've got any questions for either of our two speakers. I've got a question here from Carl Peterson, and this doesn't have anything to do, well, this isn't specifically for veterans, but he's asking if one of you would please address the Green Amendment and its shortcomings and benefits.
I could take a stab at that.
Sure.
So the Green Amendment proposes to amend the Constitution of the state of New Mexico. Actually, I have it up on my screen. I was looking at it earlier. It intends to put the following into the state constitution. Quote, the people of the state of New Mexico have the natural, inherent, and inalienable right to a clean and healthy environment, including water, air, soil, flora, fauna, ecosystems, and climate, and to the protection of the natural, cultural, scenic, and healthful qualities of the environment. And then it declares protection of the environment to be a fundamental importance to health, safety, and the public interest. And then it makes the state and its political subdivisions, quote, the trustee of the natural resources of New Mexico, and requires the state to conserve, protect, and maintain natural resources for the benefit of all New Mexicans, including present and future generations. I think it's, I can say I certainly support everything that's there. I mean, these ideas, I agree with completely. I think the question I have is, what does the world look like if this is in the Constitution? What sort of litigation results? How, who sues whom, and how do those lawsuits unfold? We're working very hard to diversify our economy to become less dependent on oil and gas. One of the things that we're trying to do is bring in things like film and TV. Amazon is right now building a 1.2 million square foot soundstage complex on the west side of Albuquerque. And there's a lot of environmental permitting that goes into that. There's a lot of, they're using a lot of natural resources, a lot of the ground there, a lot of water is going into using that facility. My worry is that if this were in the Constitution, is there going to be someone, I mean, doesn't even have to be a New Mexican, is there someone in the world who decides that that's not, that the construction of Amazon Studio is not in keeping with preserving natural resources of that area for future generations, and do they sue the state to try to stop the construction of those sound stages? As it's written, it's possible that could happen. And that would, I think, create a tremendous amount of uncertainty on the part of businesses that we're trying to recruit to New Mexico. And, so I think we need to be very careful as we do this, really think it through. Do we want to get to the end goal by increasing the staffing and the budgets for our regulatory agencies and the Environmental Improvement Board? Do we want to make sure that the Environment Department and the Energy Department are fully staffed so that they can enforce the strong environmental protection laws that we have on the books? Or do we want to sort of give it over to citizens to enforce kind of piecemeal with citizen lawsuits under the Green Amendment? I think there's just a lot of unanswered questions. I'm going to refer it to committee tomorrow. It's going to go to the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee and then to the Judiciary Committee, where I'm a member. And we'll see what the sponsors have to say about it. The last thing I'll say is I've got a long record as an environmental and conservation champion, right? I mean, that's been one of the main things that I'm known for in the legislature. So the goals here, I support entirely. I think I still just have some questions about whether or not this is the right way to get to the goal that we all share. That's kind of my initial impression at this point.
That's really an interesting insight. I've been talking and, hearing a lot of people talk about the Green Amendment. One of the questions was litigation. One of the things that has come up is what's your metric? How do you measure the effectiveness of it? It's so hard to measure a negative, but it's in a few states. Has it accomplished the overarching goal that we really want in Pennsylvania and in Montana? But I had not heard about that, where this may become a barrier to entry to new businesses or industries that want to come here as we try to move away from the really extractive industries that we have been dependent on. That's a great answer. Does anybody else want to comment on that of our speakers?
Well,
Well,
first of all, I want to thank both of you representatives for being champions of the environment. And I do think that this is one of the most important issues facing our state. And it looks to me like the Green Amendment was sort of a last ditch effort. I mean, I'm thinking back to the previous administration, which completely defunded a 20% cut in the Environment Department. And so, there really was little enforcement of regulations, and it was difficult to, I guess, gain standing in court and come up against that. So I think that may be part of it. But one of the things that I was interested in is, Mr. Speaker, the funding level for the Environment Department this time. I know that the governor is proposing a big increase for the Environment Department. I think it's something like 47% or 48% over the current budget, which has been really bare bones. And mainly, to me, the department just served as a pass-through for federal funds. So I wonder, is the legislature proposing to use some of the new money as well to sort of rebuild the Environment Department? I know she has plans for a climate change bureau and for some other programs. And I'm wondering, how does that sit with you, and what are your plans?
Yeah, so this is sort of like, it almost seems planned, but I've actually got those numbers right here. So the governor's request for the Energy Department is $31.2 million total. The LFC framework is $26 million, so there's about a $5 million difference, which in an $8.4 billion budget is not that big of a difference, and I think we're going to get pretty close.
Excuse me, just one question. Is that energy and minerals, or is that environment?
That's energy. In the Environment Department, the governor requested $23.8 million. The LFC framework had 17.1, so a $6.7 million difference. Both of those so the LFC framework has about a 16% increase average between those two departments, and I think the governor's request averages out to about a 24% increase. So we're I think we'll get closer to the governor's numbers. There's a few things that we're not sure we really understand that are in her budget. Like we had figured, for example, this is one example, we had $240,000 for the hemp bureau, and she asked for 2.4 million, which would be 20 people, 20 full-time employees. There's a few of those things that are kind of like head scratchers that we don't really see that there's that much need for that many people in the hemp bureau. So the hearings will sort that out, but you're definitely going to see large increases to both of those departments. And in the special session that we had back on redistricting, keep in mind we spend about 35 million of the ARPA money on environmental and conservation projects. And we've got another 105 million in one-time money for climate resiliency projects, watershed restoration, habitat restoration, trails, parks, beautification efforts. So that's, I mean, you know, Senator, when you were here, $130 million for conservation and climate. It was like, I mean, completely unthinkable even just a few years ago. And now it's becoming sort of a regular occurrence. So that's really great. And that money will continue to flow. And let me take advantage of the opportunity to welcome Representative Harry Garcia, member of the House and a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. He's joined us. Hello, Harry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Welcome, Representative. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. We're a little bit late because the HESC is the only one that works late.
Well, thanks for joining. Better late than never.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the conversation about the Green Amendment and increased funding for environment and energy. Those are really important. We've got one more question, but before we go there, I would just like to kind of circle back to something Representative Martinez was talking about. And I completely agree. If there's anything that we could help or work together or assist with to figure out how we in the state here can make sure that caretakers for veterans are reimbursed or taken care of, we are happy to do it. So if we can, I'm offering our assistance. I'm offering Greg's assistance, frankly, but we will all be there to help. And, you know, it's just a preventative measure. If we can keep veterans at home, they don't have to move down to TRC, no matter how lovely the new facilities might be. We want to keep them at home. And it's the same thing with a couple of the other issues that we're really advocating for, like the Veterans Treatment Courts. Let's not let them get into jail and into that whole cycle of recidivism. Let's keep them out. So I just want to thank you for that. Torres, would you please ask the other question, sir, that we had pop up?
Of course, ma'am. This is from our guest, Brian Wempen, and this is addressed for the Speaker and Representative Martinez. It asks, what are plans to support and fund long-term solutions to address the public health crisis with substance use disorders and mental health services in person and telehealth for the veterans population? Comments would be appreciated by, of course, the Speaker Martinez and Representative Speaker Egolf and Representative Martinez. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you know, we've been working, I think, over the last, I want to say, 3-4 sessions in rebuilding the behavioral health system that was dismantled back in 2013 by the previous governor. And as folks got kicked off their services, it's been very difficult to bring folks back. The other difficulty is just shortage of providers. And that's a very real problem. And we have a number of legislators who have been working toward a solution, including things like tax credits for folks to come to the state and practice. I was talking to somebody just yesterday, actually, another one of our members, about thinking really big here, but maybe providing some sort of student loan forgiveness that doesn't put people through some sort of application process and some sort of 10-year plan, but really like cutting a check to an institution to be able to pay off loans. There are a lot of legal questions with whether or not we could do those kinds of things, but I think thinking outside the box is imperative, because people can't wait, you know, for us to rebuild a system that might be here in 6 or 7 years. If you need services now, you need services now. So, you know, I think that's the challenge. But as the speaker noted, you know, our appropriations committee, our legislative finance committee, in the interim as well, have been working toward rebuilding those budgets, and it's something that continues to this day. In terms of what you all can do, you know, I think you all are critical, a critical piece here. Being able to advocate, being able to do what you're doing right now on the Zoom, hopefully soon being able to do this in person as well is super helpful. because it helps inform us and it helps inform the process. Lastly, to Claudia's point, caregiving, especially for folks who are dealing with mental behavioral health, because not everybody deals simply with a physical issue. A lot of our veterans are dealing with mental health issues that might be very difficult to diagnose. There's no reason why we shouldn't be providing the supports for those folks and for those families. And so I think that as we move toward this session, and then as we move to the next interim and the next legislative session in 2023, we should be thinking about creative ways of doing that. So I'll stop there. I don't know if the speaker or if Representative Garcia want to chip in, but those are some thoughts.
Yeah, I
Rudy?
don't know that I have anything to add. Harry or Rudy, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Mr. Speaker, I would like to say a few words. I joined the meeting late, and thank you for being there, Mr. Speaker. But, we need to help our veterans with transportation issues. Not only in the southern part of the state, just the whole state is, we're having a hard time with the transportation. I'm going to carry a bill to try and reduce the tax on retired veterans. And, I brought this up because, I'm going to need support on it, because it would be nice. Because if we carry this bill and it goes through, Mr. Speaker, I think it's like a $20 million hit on the state. But these people that are retiring, some of them are 50 years old. They can still be productive members of our state and make more. The $20 million can be recouped just by the money these people are going to put into our state. Those are just a few issues. Like I said, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Floor Leader, we really appreciate you guys being on this meeting today. It's really important to us. And, we have a lot of issues that we got to address, and one at a time, we'll get them done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, we're gonna pay for part of it with that special gross receipt surtax for the communities of Theru and Grants, right?
Yes, sir. And the rest of it's going to come. The rest of it's going to come from the floor leaders' junior money and stuff. Right, Javier?
That's
No.
right. Gladly.
Javier, say yes. I want to hear it.
Madam Chair, if I
All
may,
Yes, please, Rudy, jump in here, sir.
right, thank you. And thank you, Representative Garcia, for being here tonight, as well as everybody on the call right now. Quick question and concern, and this is mainly the Department of Veteran Services. It's one of the smallest agencies in the state, and one of the agencies that has the smallest budget. We're looking at a number of things, as Representative Garcia mentioned. Transportation is an issue. We put together a task force with Dr. Kaufman, and a plan was developed with a pilot program being suggested. And the thing was the funding issue, that it would cost too much money. But then we have these issues of 90-year-old veterans having to travel from 1 o'clock in the morning till they get back home at 11 o'clock at night. To me, that's not right for those World War II veterans, the Korean veterans and such. But one of my biggest concerns is the department itself. We have a big issue with veterans homelessness. And, given the task of trying to resolve the homeless issue for veterans by the Department of Veteran Services, and not having the adequate funding to even address the issue, much less put a dent in it. So one of the things that I'm requesting or asking of you to consider is visit with the Department of Veteran Services and see what they can do with about the homelessness, not only in the metros, but also in the rural areas. That amount of funding, I can't give you a number, but it would be something to consider. And I certainly appreciate both your comments about veterans. And Majority Leader Martinez, I appreciate your comments. And certainly it appears that now the House of Representatives is really working towards helping our veterans. And that's one of it's been my priorities, and I'm still working with several veterans groups. And hopefully this can be something on your priority list. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you for that,
Representative
Rudy.
Martinez. I appreciate it.
Hey, Claudia, unfortunately,
sir.
I need to jump off. So, thanks to everyone for being here. Rudy, it's really great to see you. I'm sitting here with Rena, and for everyone who's watching, Rena's our chief of staff. And Rudy, Rena says to send you her very, very best. We miss you
Thank you
tons.
very much. Same here.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Speaker,
Thanks,
before
everybody.
you jump off,
Yeah.
Thank
one more thing, I'm sorry, Claudia, to jump in.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, what Rudy just said about the services we provide through our agency, we're short VSOs in the state, and that's a veteran service officer. We can't afford to we don't have enough VSOs in this state to service our veterans. And Mr. Speaker, we need to, if we would, Javier, Mr. Floor Leader, I'm sorry, we need to look at these things in reality, because when I came in 6 years ago, and I partnered up with Mr. Martinez, Rudy Martinez, and there was hardly no help for veterans. And it's moving up, we're moving up the ladder, and I appreciate what you guys do, but we need to do a little bit more. Because remember, without veterans, we won't be having these conversations. And two things we got to take care of: the young and the old, and in between our veterans. Thank you.
Do it.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time very much. Have a nice evening.
Right.
All right. So let's move on to former Senator Dee Dee Feldman. We would love to hear from you, ma'am.
Well, thank you, Claudia. And I don't get to say thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was a very familiar refrain for me when I was in the New Mexico Senate. But for those of you who don't know me, I was a senator for 16 years. I was elected in 1996 and served to 2012. So it was back at the turn of the century. I'm just thinking about the changes in today's legislature from the legislature in which I served. And that was basically the subject of the first book I wrote, called Inside the New Mexico Senate: Boots, Suits, and Citizens. And I mean, it's a real sea change. Just the idea of a budget that is $8.4 billion. That's right, Javier, that's the budget for this year, as proposed by both the governor and the LFC. When I started, we were lucky to see a budget that reached, 1.8, maybe $2 billion. And it was a very different situation. Not to mention the change in membership, which is younger now, more women now, especially in the House. I think the Senate has not changed as rapidly as the House, but it has changed. The books that I can offer, and I put them in the chat, are first provide a little context to the current the current composition and the current functioning of both the House and the Senate. And the first one shows how some things don't work with the Senate and the House, and it really does include the House in addition to the Senate. And one of the things that doesn't work, and there are plenty of things that do work, but one of the things that doesn't work is the idea of a 30-day session, which is what we have now. 30 days it's a constitutional requirement. We have a 60-day session and a 30-day session in even numbered years. And it's really not enough time to, in my view, to handle the increasing load of business that that is including climate change and COVID and behavioral health concerns, and especially when the federal government is gridlocked and not as much of a partner as they once were, especially in terms of health and human services. So that book talks a little bit about some of the overall characteristics of the legislature, the division between the rural and the urban, and the idea that this is supposed to be a citizens' legislature, which is mainly an unpaid legislature, except for the per diem, which has increased also over the years. When I was elected in '96, on the same ballot that I appeared as a candidate was a constitutional amendment to increase the per diem for legislators to the federal rate. Before that, it had been $75 a day, and that was it. And so it looked like actually on the ballot that it was going to be a decrease in per diem, but it was an increase in per diem, which was very necessary at that time. But I think now is, something with the number of corruption cases that we have had in the past 3 or 4 years. And right now I'm working with Common Cause New Mexico, which is focused on voting rights and campaign finance reform and corruption, and getting a more ethical atmosphere, and brighter lines between what is a conflict of interest and what is not a conflict of interest. But those are some of the big issues that overlay all the individual concerns with education and veterans affairs and crime, which is going to be such a big issue this year. So it's always good to have context, I think. The recent book that I wrote was actually a memoir that is based on my personal experiences. The other one was kind of a journalistic book, but 10 More Doors really is the story of my campaigns in the North Valley and how I went in search of votes and really found a community instead of just votes. And that is what guided me, and I think what guides many legislators in introducing legislation and doing what they do as a public service, which is something that we have kind of forgotten about now, but that's really what it's all about. So I just want to say a little bit, and you've heard from the experts on the legislature now, but I had the occasion to watch the State of the State address from the governor yesterday and comment on it for the New Mexico PBS. And it was really striking what the speaker said tonight is this is the time to dream big. And that was actually the theme of the governor as well, is we have the money. We don't have the excuse that we can't do it, that we have heard so often because we're focusing on the present crisis. Now is the time for generational change. And that was her message. And it's also the message that I've heard from the finance committees in the legislature. And so I look forward to a very big agenda. Although, again, that is hamstrung by the fact that this is a 30-day session. And it's hard to spend, I would imagine, $8.4 million in 30 days. So not that there hasn't been some preparation for this, but to fully vet some of these new initiatives, like I would really love to see what Representative Martinez is talking about, a kind of care corps for not only for New Mexico veterans who really need it and deserve it, but also for all seniors in New Mexico who deserve to stay in their homes, but can't now because Medicaid, or Medicare rather, does not pay for in-home services. And so it's only the wealthy or those that have a family that can care for them that are able to stay in their homes, which is really what we want for our seniors. And it's a better deal for the state anyway, because institutions are more expensive.
That's exactly right, isn't it? I mean, the
Yeah.
more that we can do to keep people at home and get the care there, then we don't have to provide the more expensive social services,
Yeah.
which might meet their needs, but it's not as satisfying. I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to just jump in for a little bit of a conversation. I think you've brought up some fabulous points. They're talking about dream big, both the governor and the speaker, and I'm hearing that, being in the Senate a little bit around the edges. Dream big. What do we want to do that we've not been able to do, that we've been asking, that citizens have been asking for years? And the answer is always, there's not enough money. So these structural changes are huge. We have to change the fundamental process of the institutions so that we are able to, in a very thoughtful manner, spend 8 times what you had the ability to spend 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think it's just spot on. I would like to say, though, that as we talk about our community, we focus here on the veterans and military families community, just to raise that visibility within the Democratic Party and to help those people. But when we do that, we can certainly expand these programs to help everybody else who didn't serve but deserves the same kind of care. And I'd like to see if anyone's got a question specifically for former Senator Dee Dee Feldman, or if we can just move on. I'd love to hear from Rudy Martinez, and we could take questions then. So what would you prefer, ma'am?
I think I'd love to hear from Rudy.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Rudy, it's all yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as I mentioned earlier, I now serve as, and I have the honor of serving as the chair of the Committee for Veterans Advocacy. The Committee for Veterans Advocacy has done quite an amazing job this last session by not only creating information for legislation that is being introduced by our fellow Democrat veterans and any other legislator. So the committee has a staff that provides information to these individuals so they can have the right information to have those bills succeed. So not only that, but we also have been as members of the committee, have been able to not only provide that information, but also testify in committees through Zoom. That has been a great tool to advocate for those bills that we're supporting. So we also provide information to our legislators on our priorities as far as what we're actively supporting. We're also tracking the legislation. We have a great individual that does tracking of the individual pieces of legislation and how we prioritize those pieces of legislation. And again, testifying before committee. And then we also distribute position papers on priority issues to inform our legislators what the support needs to be done. And it's done during the session. And during the post session, the committee has created a report card, and they grade the legislators as to how they stand on veterans issues, which is, I think, is a great asset, and it's a great tool for our legislators from A to the fine and dandy grades, the F's and D's. Now, there's another program that we've been working on. And, we've been working on the Veterans Treatment Court. It's a program that a veteran has a choice of either going through the Veterans Treatment Court or through the civil court. The Veterans Treatment Court is a program that provides resources for mental health, also for drug abuse or alcohol abuse. It's a very stringent course, but the veterans that have gone through it have mentioned that if they had not gone through Veterans Treatment Court, they would probably be in prison or ultimately not be alive. So it's a program that we've been proposing. We have currently 3 programs in New Mexico, one in Alamogordo or Otero County, another one in Doñana County, out of Las Cruces, and in Albuquerque. And I understand there used to be a program that didn't fail, but for whatever reasons, they closed their doors, but they're trying to open those doors again. We also have, currently, we have 4 other districts or judicial districts that are proposing to open these kind of treatment centers. One is Judicial District 1, which is Santa Fe. We have the second judicial district, which is in Albuquerque, reestablishing a formerly operating veterans court. We have the 6th judicial district, which is down here in the southwest part of the state, which includes the counties of Luna, Hidalgo, and Grant. And we also have the one in Taos that is seriously looking at providing that type of service. And the 13th judicial in Sandoval County to create that program to help our veterans. And what much better use of public monies than having a person go to prison for like around $45,000 a year and going through a treatment court, and these individuals become a productive citizen for our state. So those are some of the things that we have worked on. And I'm going to ask Mr. Greg Seeley to touch on the IBMF legislation. And it's a pretty critical piece of legislation, and hopefully that it can be funded. The ask is $100,000. So Greg, if you'll kind of give us an update on that one.
Yes, sir. And thank you so much, Rudy. It's an honor to be on the committee with you, and you've been such a wonderful mentor me and to the team, and I'm just grateful that we have you leading us. So thank you so much. To the folks on the call, I want to talk real quick about HB 12, right? We have a bill this year that we've worked hard on to put forward for a program called America Serves. America Serves is a coordinated community care program. It was a program built by Syracuse University. They have the nation's leading think tank, if you will, for veteran and military families, called the Institute for Veteran and Military Families, IVMF. And IVMF has built a number of programs. If there's veterans on the call that have been through a transition in the last 10 years, you may know Boots to Business. You may know some of the other programs that they've built. But America Serves is a wonderful program. There are 20 of them across the nation, but there are none in the Southwest, save for the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. And we would be the first statewide program in the West, truly in the West, where it is a very rural veteran population that we have in our state. Some counties have as much as 18% of their population are veterans here in New Mexico, which is, it's an extremely high number on average for our country. So real quick, HB 12 is to fund a landscape assessment to build an America Serves program here. It'll be called New Mexico Serves. And the Democratic Party of New Mexico Veterans Caucus has been working very hard through our Committee for Veterans Advocacy to put forward a bill to fund this program. It would be hosted by Central New Mexico University. And right now, our primary sponsors are Representative Debbie Sariana in the House and Senator Harold Pope in the Senate. New Mexico has the second fewest number of veterans serving in a state legislature right now across the entire country. It's interesting that we have the majority of the veterans serving in our roundhouse right now are Democrats, and it's Democrats that are leading on these bills. We're actually very lucky that we have good Democratic leadership right now that is supporting these things, from our governor, who passed HB 30, HB 120, which for folks who want to go back and look at those are licensed reciprocity for military spouses, right? She passed Purple Star program, which is education support for military children that are moving here to New Mexico. We are lucky to have Democrats leading on this, right? We have a legislature that is supporting a number of different veterans efforts. We have Harry Garcia has been fighting the good fight to try to get property taxes and military retirement to be on par with other states. We're not trying to necessarily carve out an extreme exception just for veterans. Leaders like Rep. Garcia, like Chairman Alcon, have been fighting to try and make New Mexico on par with other states. And so I'll wrap it up right there with just saying that we are very lucky to have some really cool programs that are out there right now. And we've got some legislators out there that are fighting for us.
Thank you, Greg. And Madam Chair, if I may, real quick, I'll run through some of the other positions that we're that we're supporting. It'd be the last expand rural health practitioner tax credit, which is a proposal. I believe the amount is like 4 million or 40 million. That would be available for our caregivers in the rural communities. Public-private partnership, which we have been using in certain areas of the state. Military retirement income. There's two pieces of legislation on that, and I believe it's up to $30,000 exemption. Cap on certain interest from our payday lending program institutions, and the proposal is to lower it to 36%. Public assistance for household services, that's being carried by Representative Allison and Chandler. The utility easements for broadband by Senator Padilla. Veteran procurement preference by Senator Pope. Veteran hiring preference by Senator Pope. We have military spouses, which Greg mentioned on the reciprocity for spouses, military spouses. Amend procurement special preferences by Senator Shendo. Tax exemption for military retirees, again, the same bill. And operational support for homeless shelter, which that's specifically for Santa Fe County or for the city of Santa Fe. As I visited with, or I mentioned to the speaker and our great majority leader, Mr. Martinez, is the homeless shelter issue, not only for the city of Santa Fe or the county of Santa Fe, but it's statewide. And it certainly impacts our veterans that we see across the state. In a little small town like Silver City, we have an influx of homelessness, and it seems to be growing. And we have one small shelter, and it's overwhelmed by the number of folks that are seeking shelters. So those are some of our issues that we are truly supporting, and certainly asking for your support as the leaders of our House and also for the Senate. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Rudy. Really appreciate that. I want to circle back just for a minute on that predatory lending. And I would really appreciate Representative Martinez's thoughts on that. While we're on active duty, the feds cap the interest that short-term, just call them loan sharks, we cap it at 36%, and that's to protect the military. And when you get out of the military and you walk off base, what's there? Loan sharks, pawn shops, and the rates are crazy. And then that's the first step into the debt trap. And it went around last session, but got hijacked and it didn't work. What are your thoughts about it passing this year, this session? And is there anything we can possibly do to help its odds of passing? What we want to do is protect veterans with a 36% cap, just like the feds protect active duty. And of course, we want that for all New Mexicans, but that's where we're coming from. Sir?
Great question. I don't think it's as much of the House not wanting to pass a cap rate. In fact, I think the House is ready to pass a cap rate. I think what happened at the end of the previous session is you got the two chambers, as is the case with, quite frankly, most major pieces of legislation. Time runs out, each chamber sort of stakes their position, and more often than not, there's a compromise. In the process, we call it a conference committee if there's not an agreement on the amendments, but more often than not, there's an agreement that comes into play, whether it's 36% or 25% or 95%, there's an agreement. What we saw last time play out, I think, was speaking for the House, I from what I recall, I think that there was an unwillingness to go into conference committee. And at that point, as time ran out, the bill died. I think that there's more support than one would think for these rate caps. Personally, as a legislator from District 11, I think 36% is way too high. I think it should be lower. I've been working, and because it's the 30-day session, it's hard to do too much, as Senator Feldman stated earlier. But I would love to see a state-supported small loan program. The way we do for small businesses, there should be one for consumer loans, where rates are capped at no more than 5%. And families can tap into these funds for everyday emergencies, from fixing the car to patching up a leaky roof, and not force families to go into debt that oftentimes is unsustainable. But contrary to what we've read in the paper and sort of these discussions about the House just not wanting to cap rates. I just don't think that's factually true. I think the House has led on a number of issues dealing with working families, dealing with working people, including veterans, more often than not. And I've had the great honor of being at the crossroads of some of that great legislation along with Chairman Alcon and Representative Garcia and Representative Martinez when he was in the House. So we're no strangers to doing the right thing for working people. And I think what you saw last year was just an outlier where one chamber didn't necessarily want to, go to the table at the end of the session to negotiate a compromise. Now, whether that compromise or not is, something that we can be happy with is another story. In 2019, Jim Trujillo and I carried the big tax reform bill, which was really working to undo the very inequitable tax package that was passed during the Richardson years, where we slashed the income tax rates in half, and essentially you had a CEO paying the same rate as the administrative assistant. It took us forever to get to the last night of the session, go to the Senate, and then be forced essentially by the process into a conference committee. Chairman Trujillo and I walked in there and said, all right, let's do it, right? Let's talk. And so we, I think it was 2 a.m. the night before, we were meeting with Senate Finance leadership, and we figured out the compromise. And you know what? What was the compromise? Everything I dreamt of as we were working on House Bill 6 in 2019? Not at all. But it was a damn good bill by the time we got done. And thank God for that bill, because now we tax out-of-state corporations like Amazon on their sales to New Mexicans, whereas before we were not, right? Now we're taxing the highest earning New Mexicans at a higher rate than we were before. So, compromise is not a dirty word. Compromise is what we're here to do as we work through this legislative process. I think that sooner rather than later on the issue of small loans and interest rates, we will see a solution. But I think that, the parties do need to come together and find what that solution will be. And once that happens, I think you'll see progress on that front. But I'm super proud of my House colleagues who I think have worked really hard. Nobody can say that we're not for working people. Like, trust me, look at our record. And, we have been the champions in this legislature on issues impacting working people, including the folks on this call, Representative Garcia, Chairman Alcon, and Speaker Egoff when he was here on the call, and Representative Martinez. Not to deviate too much, but Representative Martinez has been talking about, along with Representative Garcia and Chairman Alcon, about income tax for veterans, for enlisted members. There's a bill. I think it's already been filed or will be filed here soon. That I think we're going to take a real close look at it. I think it's Representative Garcia's bill, if I'm not mistaken. But these are issues that are critical. These are issues that we need to take a close look at when it comes to protecting working class New Mexicans, which includes our veterans. So hopefully that answered your question. But we will remain strong in working for working families.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. And I certainly know which party is the party of veterans. It's not the party of the military industrial complex. Democrats care, Democrats deliver. And I'm really happy to hear that there may be the political will to move that forward. And as you were saying, 36% is still very high. Who's going to take out a loan on a credit card or anything at 36%? But people talk like you're coming down from 175, you get to 99. That's wonderful. Well, let's start at the average, income tax rate or the average rate that we pay interest for different loans, and let's go up from there. But I very much appreciate your comments. And if there's anything we can do to help with that, I am happy to. I think we have one more question in the Q&A. Taurus, would you like to tee that up, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Well, it is that time in the program for our Agua es Vida question. Our member, Carl Peterson, asked us, we have a 127,000 acre-foot water deficit with Texas with a trigger point of 200,000 acre feet. We're in deep trouble with our water inflows this year. Are we going to fully fund the 50-year study this session? Speakers?
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out my dinner here with some beef jerky. So apologize for eating in front of you. You know, I don't know the specifics. I don't have the budget in front of me, but I think that the legislature is making inroads. And like I said earlier, the LFC in the interim process and HAFC during the regular session, as well as Senate Finance. I think in my time up here, I've been up here 6 years. These are two of the, not only the hardest working committees, I would say, but also in the last few years have really gone through these issues with a fine-tooth comb. In our funding, I think at levels, as the speaker explained with the previous question on the Environment Department and Natural Resources, when you look at the difference between the executive request and the legislative framework, they're not that far off. However, we are the appropriators. So, you know, I think sometimes the executive can say, hey, I want $100 million for this, and here's why. But they're not the appropriators, right? The appropriators, you know, Harry is an appropriator. Rudy, when he was here, was an appropriator. I am no longer an appropriator, although I used to be once upon a time. We have a responsibility to look through each of these requests with a fine-tooth comb. Oftentimes, when we don't fund things at the level that, say, the executive is asking us to fund it, it's not because we don't believe in the issue or we don't want to resolve the issue. It's because sometimes there's just no capacity in an agency to take all that money. And, you know, part of our purview is to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, these are taxpayer dollars. These are the public monies that we're spending. The question, are we going to fund the 50-year study? The answer is, I don't know. I don't have the budget in front of me. Something that we would be happy to get back to you on. But I can guarantee you that whatever funding has been proposed by the legislature is something that has been vetted and is something that we feel is the appropriate amount. Now, can you always go up a little bit, come down a little bit? Absolutely. This is a process of 112 members that is 30 days. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of going back and forth. But there's nothing in the LFC proposed framework that I personally I'm uncomfortable with. I think it's all a great framework, and we can only work our way up from there. So I'll leave it at that. But please know, as activists, as Democratic activists in the veteran community, that you're appropriators in the legislature. We take this stuff very seriously, very seriously. And what we're proposing, we didn't just pull out of thin air. We've studied it over the interim. We've traveled the entire state with LFC, listening to different community groups and listening to different advocacy groups and different individuals, educating ourselves, informing ourselves. And what we end up with in December as the LFC framework is actually pretty darn close to the request and the needs that we see. So I'm happy to circle back with you on that specific funding amount. But just for background, that's how we appropriate funds, and that's the approach that we take. And I'm super proud of the work of our members in particular, but also the senators who serve on LFC, because I've seen them work, and those folks will work pretty darn hard. They're like a rock band. They're like on the road probably half the year at the end of the day when you take the legislative session into account, and then the week-long LFC meetings that take these folks away from their communities. Like, I mean, I'm talking, they're meeting in Gallup, they're meeting in Ruidoso, they're meeting in Deming, they're meeting in Farmington. That's not an easy drive. You know, Rudy knows, you know, when he'd come up to Santa Fe, that's like a 5-hour drive one way. Imagine doing that drive or making that drive, you know, 10 times, 10 months out of the year. That's difficult. So these guys know what they're doing, and I'm super proud of the work that they do.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful and very thorough answer. And it really should give us a good appreciation for the volunteer citizen legislative body that we have. And I think probably the best way to appreciate them is what Dee Dee Feldman said, is let's pay them. Let's pay the staff. Let's have longer sessions. let's put that $8 billion to the absolute best use we possibly can to diversify our economy and to take care of all these special communities, especially the veterans and military families communities, of course, but all the communities throughout the state, and give them a time to do that. I'm really looking forward to that structural change. I hope it happens soon. We're about 4 minutes from wrapping it up, and I want to respect everybody's time, and maybe Representative Martinez, you can get a proper dinner somewhere. But are there any last comments from any of our panelists? And I'd like to include Representative Alcón, if you have something you'd like to say to us, sir.
Just want to add that I do have the two resolutions. Nobody mentioned them. For some reason, the tax exemptions are not important to anybody. We're still fighting. I introduced them both. The resolution giving the tax deduction for disabled veterans at a percentage rate. I have introduced that one, and I have introduced also the 4,000, the one where we have the property tax exemption up to $4,000, up to $10,000, and then again this year with the COLA. So I hope you're supporting those two. That's all I had to say.
Madam Chair.
And thank you so much, sir. So Representative Alcón, actually, because of a slight problem with the Zoom link, you joined us a little bit later, but that was covered earlier. So we're very happy that you've got those resolutions. And I see that Senator Pope's got his hand up. Are you able to ask a question, sir?
Hang on.
Senator Pope is the best dressed man in the legislature.
He's not just the best dressed. He's a wonderful veteran advocate, as are some of the other gentlemen here. And unfortunately, Representative Sardinano was not able to join us. But look at you all decked out there, my friend. The floor is yours.
I didn't have any question. I just want to thank the majority leader, the speaker was on, and the representatives for all the hard work they've done, even throughout the years, advocating for veterans. It's really been a joy serving with them, serving for a little bit over a year now. And we're just going to keep fighting and doing work. And I know a lot of times I hear that, on the Senate side, sometimes things get slowed up or they don't get done. But I just think we have a huge opportunity to get these done. And I'm hoping that me being in the Senate now and working with some of our freshmen and some of the other members, that we're going to get a lot of these things done. So that's just my promise and pledge to you all. So thanks again.
Love it. It's music to our ears. Okay, is there anyone else that's got a comment or a last alibi?
I can't leave this meeting without thanking the veterans for all they have done for our state and for our country. I don't think there's any stronger bond than amongst veterans who have fought in a war together. And I think some of those bonds are real evident to me tonight. Also the advocacy. I think about Representative Martinez and the other Representative Martinez, how both of them were advocates outside of their roles as legislators. That there is such a place for advocacy, and your caucus and other caucuses. It's not just the legislators that are up here somewhere and the advocates are down here. They're mixed together, and you may be an advocate after you leave the Senate, before you leave the House, or before you get to the House. It's all based on values and working for working people.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much, Senator. You're exactly right. And I want to say, when you volunteer to serve, or even if you were drafted back in the day, we serve. And then you get out, you retire a little early, but we still serve. And I think that's the beauty that having more veterans in a legislative body can create. We continue to serve. We serve our country, our fellow countrymen and women. We just serve. We're not very partisan because that's not how we were raised in the military. We just want to get stuff done. And I think it was Representative Martinez earlier who said that most people are behind veterans. I found talking about veterans to be a wonderful bridge to talk to anyone with any party affiliation, because wonderfully now people support veterans. And that certainly wasn't the case when our beloved Vietnam veterans came home. So it's a good way to bring people to collaborate and work together.
Claudia,
Rudy?
if I may.
Rudy, please.
No, and I just wanted to thank everybody that participated tonight. Senator Pope, I thank you for joining us. It seems like the atmosphere in the legislature has taken a little bit of a different shift from where it was. The camaraderie, the working together is one of the key things to get things done. And I think we have an opportunity now with the leadership we have in the House and the Senate, and those individuals, the veterans that serve in the legislature, and how as you mentioned, when somebody serves, it doesn't matter what branch or what era they served in. A veteran is a veteran, and we continue to hold that bond amongst us. So I just want to share that with you guys.
But Army veterans are the best.
Hey, somebody mute him.
Claudia? Claudia, if I may.
Go ahead, Representative Garcia.
Thank you, Claudia. Thanks for putting this on. Thanks for the invitation. You know, I know this is all about veterans. And the Marine Corps is the best. We all know that, okay? But we'll leave that alone. I really want to take my hat off to Representative Martinez, the floor leader, because, you know, he's not a veteran, but he has really, really stepped up. Not just now. You know, we had issues a couple of years ago that he stepped up and helped me with stuff at Angel Fire when he was the tax chairman. You know, and we really need to recognize him. Rudy Martinez, you've been the best. Eloiso, D. Alcon, too bad you were in the Army, but it is what it is. So anyway, my hat's off to Floor Leader Martinez because he really has been a champion. Thank you.
Yes, he has.
Thank you, Representative. Now I have to buy Harry Garcia dinner. Great.
That was all in the deal.
He's a great advocate of McDonald's.
That's affordable. So I'd like to close, but I would certainly appreciate it if Representative Martinez and Dee Dee Feldman, if you would join our caucus. We are the Veterans and Military Families Caucus. If you have an immediate family member, parents, spouse, siblings, or children who have served, which covers an awful lot of people, you can join as a full member. And if you have not, we would love you to join as an associate member. And we have several people who are, because even though they didn't grow up in the military or have family, they care about veterans. They give a damn, and we're working hard. So we'd love to have you on board our caucus. You can go to the website, fill out the application to join, and we will get you on board. But I so appreciate
that. I will do that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Leader Martinez, I will adopt you, okay?
Okay, that means you have to feed me.
There you go. Thank you, Claudia.
Okay. Yes, sir. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Appreciate all your support. And we're going to be eyes on watching what's going on in that legislation. And Dorothy and Joan are going to be tracking everything. And we want you to be our hero and champion. And when that legislative report card comes out. All right.
Thank you, Claudia.
Okay. Have a wonderful evening, folks.
As well.
Good night.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Vemos, primo.
Vamos, primo.
Go Democrats.